Welcome to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This show features questions from the Personality Hacker community that we answer in about 10 minutes. We've been using personality types in our coaching for years, and we'd love to answer your questions about personal growth through the lens of type. You can find out more about us at personalityhacker.com. Okay, now let's hear today's question.
Hi, Antonia and Joel. My name is Andres Pascagasa. I am 24 years old and an ESFJ from Bogota, Colombia. My question is related to loops. My sister is 22 years old. She is an ENTJ, and she was recently in a loop, so unfocused, getting things done just because, and desperately seeking out pleasure. I am just worried about her. She's my favorite person in the world, and I know she has so much potential. All I want for her is to be the best version of herself and for herself. I think she might need some time alone, but she just keeps being in the external world, hanging out with ESFP friends mostly, who I really like, by the way. No judgment. Actually, one of my favorite types. But my question is the following. How healthy is spending time with people whose dominant function is one's tertiary function, and hence the loop-related one?
Thanks, Andres, for the question. So you kind of asked this question, how to get an ENTJ out of a loop, really, is the question you asked. And then you had a kind of a question at the very end there, like about hanging out with somebody, which I don't know how to approach that, Antonia, that second part. But let's just talk about you, Andres, as an ESFJ, your sister's ENTJ preferences, and you experience her in a loop and you're concerned about her. And thank you for being concerned about your sister. Somebody that doesn't know what a loop, Antonia, how would we describe what a loop is? How do we even talk about this first? Let's define what a loop is, and then we'll talk about it in relation to ENTJ preferences.
So a loop is when your dominant or driver function in the car model gets into an inappropriate relationship with the tertiary or the 10-year-old function in the car model, meaning that they're both now in cahoots with each other, and they're edging out the co-pilot or auxiliary function. In this case, with somebody with ENTJ preferences, that would be extroverted thinking and effectiveness as the driver, getting in a loop situation with extroverted sensing or sensation as a 10-year-old. And the reason why it's not a good situation to have...
Avoiding the perspectives co-pilot or introverted intuitive co-pilot.
Right. That's why it's not a good situation.
Exactly. I'm just giving for position to somebody following along. Like, well, what is the co-pilot for an ENTJ?
You got it. So the co-pilot of introverted intuition or perspectives, the reason why a loop happens at all, and this happens for all 16 types, it just looks a little different for every type. But the reason why this happens is because your driver and your 10-year-old, or your dominant and tertiary functions, they have the same what's called an attitude, in this case, extroversion. Right? If this was an INTJ, they would both be introverted functions. But effectively, they occupy the same space, right? For an ENTJ, this allows them to stay in the outside world all the time. For somebody with introverted preferences, this would allow them to stay in their inner space all the time. And the co-pilot or auxiliary function of introverted intuition or perspectives, this is a function that forces somebody with ENTJ preferences to go inward, right? It requires them to not just be in action all the time, like Andres was talking about. She's just doing things and getting things done for the sake of getting them done. This would be a function that required her to slow down, ask what her long-term vision for herself was, to try to figure out, like, why am I doing what I'm doing?
What's the meaning of this?
That's right. Yeah. And what is the inevitable conclusion to it? What's the end result, right? If I keep doing this, what is the probability of its conclusion, as opposed to just getting into action and not thinking about that? So there is a little bit that question that he asked at the end. There's a lot of relevance to the question, because he was saying that his sister is hanging out with particularly types like that have ESFP preferences. So is this going to be a problem? Like, I don't want her to be in a loop. I'm encouraging her to have some more alone time. That's not working. So she's hanging out with people with ESFP preferences. And the question I'm really getting from Andres is, like, is this doomed? Right? Like, are these people with ESFP preferences just going to, like, encourage her to stay in this loop, and it's going to continue to be a problem? Because somebody with ESFP preferences has extroverted sensing or sensation as their driver, which is the function that she's looping with. That's her 10-year-old or tertiary. So is it like just encouraging her to stay in this dynamic? And the answer is it depends on the age of the users. So people with ESFP preferences also have introverted functions, and it depends on the individual with how in tuned they are to the importance and the relevance of these functions. Their co-pilot or auxiliary is going to be introverted feeling or authenticity, which is actually a pretty important function for somebody with ENTJ preferences to tap into. So on one side, yeah, if the person is young, if they are one-sided, if they are only in their driver function and that's all they want to be doing all the time, that energy will definitely encourage an ENTJ to stay in a looping situation because they won't ask the ENTJ to go any deeper. They won't ask them to dive into their own, say, introverted feeling or authenticity, or their own introverted intuition or perspectives. That said, if the person with ESFP preferences is more developed, then introverted feeling or authenticity, it's not just their co-pilot or auxiliary function, it's what Dr. John Beebe would call their parent function. Meaning that if somebody is lacking in introverted feeling or authenticity, that's going to almost feel like a responsibility to somebody with ESFP preferences to help mine it out, to help them get in touch with their authentic self. So if they're just using this function to have fun and to try to quote unquote parent with another person to just have them have fun because everybody in the scenario is immature, that's not really a question of type. That's a question of maturity, right? And in that situation, how do you help people mature when they don't want to listen to you? You allow them to experience life and get seasoned by life and learn maturity the hard way, which actually almost all of us need to do, quite frankly. So in a situation like that, it's like, how do I get an immature person to act mature? Well, if they won't listen to you, they eventually will listen to life, and it will be forced upon them. Hopefully, actually, sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but usually people come around. But if the characters, are the characters at play, based on type, going to be bad association effectively? And the answer is not necessarily. The person that their sister is hanging out with, this ESFP or this little SWAT team of ESFPs, I don't know how many are involved, but if any of them have a flavor, a maturity to them, they might actually encourage her to get into introverted feeling or authenticity, her 3-year-old or inferior function, because they might have a parental sense of responsibility to help her do that. And on the flip side, they might encourage her parental energy to come out.
Yes.
Because introverted intuition or perspectives is her parental energy. And she might not be doing it for herself, but she might actually feel a responsibility to help somebody else do it. And somebody with ESFP preferences might feel the most like they need this. So weirdly enough, being around somebody with ESFP preferences might pull her introverted intuition or perspectives out more because she feels like they need this service from her. So I wouldn't look at the types and the players involved as necessarily being doomed. Now, how do you get an ENTJ out of a loop? Well, again, put them in the position where their parental introverted intuition or perspectives function wants to come out as a sense of responsibility. So if I found somebody that had ENJ preferences in the situation, I might ask them what I should be thinking about for my future. I might ask them how to help me create a vision for what's coming down the line, or maybe even pull them in a conversation around, say, archetypes and help them, have them help me determine what my archetypal energies are. Basically, anything that will get them in the energy of something that they won't do for themselves, maybe they'll do it for somebody else, right? And that's how our second function or parental energy tends to come up. So I might go, hey, I need your help, and then have them get into that energy on a repeated basis, and maybe they might get a taste of it and want to apply some to the self.
And I think there's a technique here too. If you have an ENTJ in your life and you'd like to ask those questions about archetypes or long timelines or try to activate that parent energy, I would say the context to do that in is the hurry up and wait transport context. So as an example, say you and your sister have to do a 2-hour car ride somewhere. And so there's no way for her to execute on any tasks or act in any way. She's trapped in a car next to you in more of an intimate setting for conversation, or you're on public transit going somewhere, or there's a reason why you're kind of waiting for something else to happen. So you're in this kind of holding pattern or waiting mode or in transit. And that's a great technique or a great space to ask them those questions because there's nothing else to do but maybe sit and ruminate a little bit more. So the context might matter. If your sister's a go person, you might have to wait for the right opportunity. It might be hard in the middle of her day to get her to think this way. Hey, while you're in the middle of your coffee run and doing this activity and making this all happen, like, can I ask you about archetypes and like try to get deep into some like perspectiving about my life and my future? She can be like, no, I'm getting stuff done, man. I don't have time for this right now, and stay in that extroverted energy. But when you're in a moment where you're pausing or waiting, well, that's a great moment to insert some of those questions you talked about, Antonia, or bring up some of those topics. So context will matter, timing will matter, obviously the age, station of life, and the timeline of each person will matter. Clearly, there's all these factors to take in, but these are some basic principles that you might try with your sister and see where the conversation goes, at least.
Yeah, I like the idea of trapping somebody in a car ride.
Yeah.
And forcing them to have to talk to you.
Yeah, or maybe trapping. Yeah, I don't know if that's the right word, but
Oh man, so much intimacy, like true soul intimacy, happens on car trips.
Yeah. Well, you're close together, but you're looking forward, so the pressure's off because you're not facing each other, and you're in a waiting task. Like you're driving somewhere, so you have to just kind of sit there and wait till you get there.
Yep.
And so I think it's a great opportunity for conversations to emerge, between people.
Yeah, agreed.
Thanks, Andres, for the question. You can ask your own question about personality types or personal growth. Visit personalityhacker.com/questions. We also have programs designed to help you with your personal growth through the lens of personality types. Again, visit personalityhacker.com and find the program that's made just for you. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode. Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships. But what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality, and then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity. Because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first. Because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.